Welcome to Pioneers in Payments, where payments experts share their insights. Now, here's our host, Donna Blum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Pioneers in Payments. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Bryan Penny from Firmly. Welcome, Bryan.
Well, thank you, Donna. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, I'm looking forward to our conversation. So you came highly recommended as a guest that I should have on the show based on your wealth of experience in the payments industry. But for those of our listeners or watchers that aren't familiar with who you are and your background, would you mind sharing a little bit about your experience in the payments industry and the work that you do at Firmly?
Sure. First off, I actually, as of November of last year, retired. So I am advising Firmly as a very, very part-time advisor. But one of the things that we'll talk about are some of the trends that are out there. And Firmly is really big in the agentic commerce space. And so what I'm working with them on is how to expose merchants to what agentic commerce is, how Firmly can help them, and things like that. I would say I've been in payments most of my career. I'm an accountant by training, so I'm a CPA, and about in the late 90s, I joined First Data, which was kind of my first entree into financial services, and worked back in the day with an organization within First Data that took in-person payments. So you needed to pay your electric bill and you wanted real-time credit. Back in the day, you actually had to take a check in or cash in to a retailer. And so that led into some time at Telecheck when Check 21 was coming of age. And then fast forward, I joined Nordstrom. And during my time at Nordstrom, I was very much part of their credit business. And so the issuing business that Nordstrom had, and this was when payments was, E&V was starting. I got a tap on the shoulder from one of my bosses at the time who said, "Hey, we've got this thing called E&V, and can you figure it out and help me figure it out with both our issuing business and the retail business?" So really at that point in time is when I dug deep into payments. Spent 13 years at Nordstrom, left Nordstrom, went to Amex for a couple of years, and wrote the network rules at Amex, which for me was an opportunity to kind of step on the other side of the payment space and learn what it's like being inside one of the networks, which was great. It was a great experience, great company, great exposure while I was there. And then after that, while I was at Nordstrom, I joined the board of the Merchant Advisory Group. They work very closely with merchants on payments. Obviously, when I went to Amex, I had to step off the board. And at the end of my time at Amex, I got the opportunity to join the MAG as a staff and spent the last part of my career with the MAG, helping merchants and really digging deep into the payment space. So that's my background. Now I am, happily retired, and I'm doing some volunteer work with the U.S. Payments Forum, with X9. I'm a member emeritus of X9, and then I'm doing some work with Firmly, and I am talking with a couple other companies on how I can help them. My stance in retirement is that I want to continue to give back to the industry that gave so much to me. So, that is one of the big things that I'm trying to do.
That's wonderful. And in some ways, that's what you're doing right now is giving back to the industry, sharing some of your wisdom with others who are coming up through the payments industry and preparing them for what's next in their journey. So thank you for being here. And Matt, wow, what an incredible background you have. you're not the first person I've talked to who said that they're semi-retired, but it just seems like people, if they've been in payments, they kind of stay in payments, even if it's only, if it's scaled back and only part-time. I think it's just such a dynamic and exciting industry. Maybe it's difficult to actually leave it behind.
Well, I think the one thing that I would say is the people make it that way. I have made some very long-standing friendships in this industry and been able to meet people that I will be a part of for the rest of my life. And I think that's what keeps me coming back. I stay in touch. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the Mag Payments conference in February. So I got to see everybody, a few months after I had retired. And I hope I get the opportunity to stay in touch with people. And that would be one thing that I want to stay in touch with people. And if anybody needs anything or wants help, I'm always here to help them.
That's great. Well, everybody heard it. You can reach out to Bryan if you need help. So, Bryan, we're here to talk about everything that's happening in the industry today, and it's obviously very dynamic and constantly evolving. So, you and I can talk in 6 months from now and probably have an entirely different conversation. But let's start off with, what do you perceive to be the most notable trend in the industry today?
I think what I was talking to somebody a while back, and it seems like every conference right now is talking about AI and specifically in payments, agentic commerce. And as I have seen, we saw EMV take 10 years in the US. We saw Apple Pay launch, the digital experience launch, and take many, many years to really be, ubiquitous, is what I would say. I foresee that agentic commerce is going to be something that is going to be very quick in implementation. I think it's going to be one of those things that becomes ubiquitous pretty quick. And so is it going to be that, differentiator for people? But I think it's going to be an expectation that people have going forward. So right now, I think everybody needs to be aware of what agentic commerce is. And it's not just AI, but specifically for payments, it's what's that customer experience going to be that's going to be driven between sometimes the customer and an agent, an AI agent. Sometimes it'll just be the AI agent talking to the merchant on the consumer's behalf, and the consumer will have hopefully given the authorization to be able to do everything. But I think that's where it's at right now.
Yeah, that's incredible. I just think about that. I don't know, it sort of boggles the mind that, you can actually have an agent that's buying and selling on your behalf, and you are sort of, well, not completely hands off, obviously, but yeah, it's just interesting to think about that.
Yeah, and I think I say that, but then I also say that the industry, if it's moving very quickly, the payments industry is not known for necessarily speed in some of the things. So I think the networks have to speed things up a little bit. I saw an article today that Amex is launching a toolkit around AI and agentic. So I'm hopeful that the network rules will start to follow that regulations. Everybody hates that word in the United States, but the reality is that regulation is something that's needed so that it doesn't turn against the consumer and, the turn against the merchant specifically, because right now the rules are very much that an agentic transaction is a card not present transaction. And so the merchant bears all the risk. When in reality, if the agent tells the merchant to send Bryan a red shirt, and Bryan really wanted a burgundy shirt, and the agent didn't understand the difference between red and burgundy, the merchant's going to be the one that's going to have to deal with the return or deal with the dispute from myself. So I think there's a lot of work that has to be done, and that's some of the areas where I'm trying to be involved. I know U.S. Payments Forum is going to be coming out with a paper relatively soon on all things agentic, and the X9. I'm working on a paper with them on kind of types of payments, and agentic will be a part of that. So I think there's a lot going on with the industry.
That's great. And thank you for contributing to those papers. They really help the entire industry, so grateful for you.
That is one of the things. Yeah, that's one of the things that I have. Payments is definitely someplace where there's a lot of information out there. You just have to go get it. And again, if somebody's lost and they don't know where to go, reach out to me and I'll help you. I'll help you try to find it. I enjoy that and enjoy trying to point people in the right direction.
It's excellent. Okay, so there's, like I said, a lot going on, and with all of the innovation and changes in the industry, there are obviously opportunities and challenges. What would you say is the greatest opportunity for organizations that process payments today?
I think the greatest opportunity is know what your customers want and don't give them what they don't want, because you could potentially lose customers. When a lot of the digital wallets started, we called that the NASCAR effect, where you just had wallet after wallet after wallet on some of the websites. And I think we've gotten away from that. There's a lot of consolidation that's happened. But I think as whether you're a merchant that is trying to keep your consumer happy, or you're a bank trying to, facilitate payments for your customers, everybody doesn't need everything. And so know your customer, give your customer what they want. Don't put everything out there for everyone. And I think, that's what I would say. The most successful retailers in the payment space are ones that have said, I understand what your technology is, I understand what you're doing, but I don't think it's right for my customer right now. I had an experience where I was sitting in Cupertino, California at somebody's headquarters, and my arm was being twisted to, be a launch partner for this great technology. But the reality was, at Nordstrom, we had a very large private label and Visa portfolio that was not going to be supported. And so we were going to have, if we installed this new technology, it was going to disenfranchise all those loyal customers that carried, all those Nordy customers that carried that card. And so, we made the tough decision to not be a part of that. And sure enough, I think it was the right decision, and we got to the right place when the time came. But it was really tough, and it was hard for those technology partners to hear. And I think that's the key, is do what's right for your business and your customer.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I mean, we've all heard the saying, a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And if you try to be all things to all, to everyone in the industry, you're not going to be able to differentiate yourself, and you're certainly not going to be providing um, really deep value to your specific client base. So yeah, I think that's important to know your customers and to solve for what they need, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest, hold your guns. I will throw a name out there. I respect Mike Cook at Walmart. Very, he is a pioneer and he has held his guns on a lot of things through the years. And Mike, it's proven to be the right thing for his business. And that's, hopefully when people look back at the time that I was at Nordstrom, that's what people will remember there, that I held my guns for what was right for our customers.
That's great. Good advice for everyone. So we talked about the greatest opportunity. What do you think is the greatest challenge for organizations processing payments?
I think what's going on right now in payments is a little bit of the wild, wild west. And if you compare payments in the United States to payments in other parts of the world, um, we are really the wild, wild west. And so you've got, for example, right now, you've got a law in the state of Illinois that says you don't have to pay interchange as a retailer on sales tax and tips. And excise taxes and a few other things. And that is currently being challenged in the courts. So now you've got Illinois in one place, and then you might have California go a different way. You might have Colorado go a different way. And as a retailer, if you have a national footprint, that is going to be challenging. And on the flip side of that, if you're a bank or a processor, I've sat on all sides of the table, and it is not easy to have different answers in different places, and in different situations. So I think the biggest challenge is, how do we make sure that payment stays ubiquitous? It is, the beauty of what's happened in the industry is a consumer doesn't have to think. They just walk in and either tap their phone or pull their card out, and or pull cash out of their wallet, and they can go walk out with goods. I think if we don't have some centralization, and we don't have organizations like the MAG, organizations like ETA, sometimes they fight on either sides of the equation, but if we don't have somebody trying to stand up and say this is the way it should be done, I think that the biggest challenge is going to be that the consumer is the one who's going to be hurt the most, because they're gonna walk into the bodega in New York City, and their card's not going to be accepted because the bodega doesn't want to pay the interchange fee or doesn't want to deal with all of the weird things that are there. And that will be kind of, as I see it, bad. It's bad for all of the ecosystem.
Hmm. I agree. Yeah. It's we need to be moving in the direction of some standardization, right? Yeah, to keep things. I mean, we talk all the time about we want payments to have not necessarily frictionless, right? There's a healthy amount of friction, but we don't want it to be difficult for them, right? So, and some of these things you're talking about could create complexity that just makes it difficult for consumers to transact. So,
Right, right.
yeah.
And I think the one thing that I would say is, you've got retailers, you've got processors, you've got acquirers, when in the days when I started working in payments, it was just in the acquirer. Now you've got processors, acquirers, you've got the banks, you've got the networks. It is a full ecosystem. And I have said all along that the ecosystem has to work together. You can't, a player in the ecosystem can't run everything and feel like it's going to be the right thing for everybody. The ecosystem has to work together. And, in my time, whether it was EMVCo, it was W3C, it was X9, it was the US Payments Forum, it was ETA, all of those organizations, they have to work together to make sure that at the end of the day, the consumer is going to be able to transact in a way that makes them happy.
Right. Yeah. Ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to, right? Is delighting your customers. And how do you delight your customers? You give them the ability to transact the way they want to, the way that makes sense for them, that's going to help them. So, yeah. Okay, so if you had to, Bryan, think about all your sum total of knowledge and provide our audience with one silver bullet piece of advice, what would that be?
I think we've talked about it. I think the advice is never lose sight of the customer. I have been in the room with the largest payment networks and their innovation teams, and they've got great ideas, and they're like, it's great. And I'm like, at the end of the day, what's the customer experience? I know that this is the idea that you have, but how is it going to play with the customer, and how is it going to play with the consumer? So the silver bullet is never lose sight of that consumer. Never lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, they're the ones that are either holding your credit card, have your wallet on their phone, or are buying the goods from you that they're going to take back. So always remember that the consumer, and I think in my career, it was always every day, it was like, how, and this was the Nordstrom way, how is it going to affect that Nordstrom customer? And with successful organizations that I've worked with have always thought about that. I worked with Amex. Amex, it's always the cardholder. How is that Amex cardholder going to be differentiated? You talk about Target, the Target guest, or Starbucks with their rewards program or their gift card program. Those are the places where the consumer and the customer comes first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So, Bryan, just before I let you go, I want to make sure that our audience knows. We've talked multiple times about how they can reach out to you, and you'd be happy to help. So, how could they reach you, and what other information would you like to share? Like if they wanted to learn more about Fernley, what would you like to share with our audience?
So I would say that I could rattle off my Gmail address. It's bryanpenny@gmail.com. But LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. I am always looking on LinkedIn. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I'll connect you. Firmly, it's firmly.ai. And I think that is a place where you can learn a lot about Agentic. But please reach out to me through my LinkedIn. Donna, that's how you and I connected, is through LinkedIn. And so I'll respond to your message and be very happy to talk and help you through your issues.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Bryan. And I want to thank everybody for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye now.